In today's coaching session, we have the world number one, Mr. Russell Ogden. Russ is a brilliant pilot. He's been one of the most consistent pilots in the world over the last 10 years. He's also a test pilot for Ozone, and he's renowned among his peers for his incredible climbing skills. So we'll definitely be asking him about that. I'm also interested in Russ's consistency, how he's managed to achieve that level of consistency. We'll, of course, be talking about glider development, glider control. Please do post any questions you have on the feed if you're watching this live. Yeah, let's welcome Russ. Are you there, Russ?
I'm here.
Hello, Russ. How you doing?
Very good, thank you. Good to see you.
You too. You're in the south of France, right?
Yeah.
Can you just describe what the flying's like there quickly? Just a few words about that.
Well, you know this place here is where you used to live in the same village, Barcelona. We get all year round flying, so we can fly in the winters with good thermals often. But it's a brutal place. It's a very turbulent place to fly. The air's always moving. Very good quality thermals, but moving air, which is really nice to fly in. The texture of the air, in fact, changes on a daily basis. So it's never the same twice.
Why is that important, particularly for testing, then, to have moving air and quite turbulent air?
Oh, I think it's really good for just testing the inherent stability of a wing and how the glider behaves and moves and how the structure is, the chord structure, the span cohesion, all those different sort of facets that we're looking at when we're comparing wings and trying to assess which is the way that we want to go, what the best way forward is with a design. So I think moving air is essential for testing how strong your wings are and how collapse resistant they are.
Russ, you look like you're about to do a DJ set, to be honest, but I want you to imagine you do.
Well, yeah,
just of an evening. Let's dive straight in there. Let's imagine you're flying down a ridge. You're quite high up. Maybe you're just under a cloud street. It's quite turbulent air. You're on half bar. You're flying like a high ENB wing. You get a 70% collapse. What do you do next?
I just lean into the collapse and a little bit of outside brake and just let the glider recover and fly away.
That was a very simple answer.
Well, it's a very simple thing to do. The glider will recover itself. You don't need to recover the glider if it's ENB and it's a normal 70% collapse. You just lean into the collapse and go with it, and the glider will recover itself.
So why is it important to lean in? Because that might feel counterintuitive to pilots who've done an SIV course and are told to sort of hold their course line by leaning against the collapse.
Yeah, I think with small collapses, 50% collapse, something like that, then by all means lean away from it. But if you're in open space and you're not at risk of hitting a cliff face, I think if you're at a cliff face or something, then it's totally different. Okay. But if you're up high and you're free and there's nothing that you're going to hit, then by leaning into it, you avoid twisting. And twisting is often creates more complex situations because then you're controlling the glider backwards. Everything gets visually upside down, and it gets more difficult to control. So avoiding twists is the most important thing. So leaning into a collapse will allow you to avoid the twist.
So you're kind of following the risers as they stay straight into the collapse.
Exactly. The glider wants to go and turn. Also, as well, I've found with very big collapses is that if you lean away too much, you can get pulled towards the outside tip, and that can make the outside tip collapse and then get more twists and make things worse. So big collapses, up high, lean into it, go with it, and let the glider recover.
Okay. And you said the outside leading edge might collapse if you use too much outside brake. Can you explain why that is?
Not if you use too much outside brake. If you use too much outside weight shift.
Okay.
And I don't know the exact physics of it, but often, especially we've learned this with testing competition wings, where the natural instinct is to want to turn, is to lean away, is to perform the collapse and then lean away immediately, and that normally makes things worse with big 75-80% type collapses.
Yeah.
And you get this feeling of being pulled in towards the outside tip, and as soon as you unload the outside tip, it will collapse. And
Okay.
then you end up in a situation where you've possibly got twists with one side re-inflating whilst the other side collapses, and you can get into trouble quite quickly there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So going with the collapse just leaves you in a collapse situation which you can always fly away from.
Right, got it.
Once you've done that first 90 to 180 degree turn, then you can just brake the glider and weight shift away if necessary.
Yeah.
Stop it from spiraling, for sure. But,
okay.
The initial response is a lean in.
And can you explain why pulling A-rises to simulate collapses can lead to a much more violent collapse than a real world collapse?
Well, it depends on how you pull a collapse. It depends on the type of glider that you've got, the tab positioning and the likes. But not always does a pulling collapse make it worse than in real life. Some of the worst collapses you can get are in real life.
Okay.
But pulling an A-riser is a way of simulating a collapse, but it's not how collapses happen in real air, because air is being forced down from above rather than being pulled from underneath, and turbulent air doesn't really care about the position of the tabs or the profile and such like. So it's an artificial way of making the glider collapse, but it's the best we can do at the moment. It's the best we can do.
Have you got any other ideas?
There's plenty more ideas coming.
Oh, interesting. What any care to share any?
What, in terms of
inducing collapses to simulate the behaviour of a wing in difficult conditions?
Well, there's one way you can do it on very high performance competition wings, which is to go at full speed and apply brake quite hard. That will give you a frontal collapse.
Right.
So that's a good way of performing frontal collapses on a comp wing, if that's something that you really want to do. But in terms of from a certification point of view, from looking at behaviour of the wings, no, that's what we have. We have A lines and we have collapse lines.
Yeah.
For the gliders that require that.
Yeah. Okay. And same question again for someone flying an E&D wing. So they're flying down the ridge. They're on their M9. We're into the future. It's even higher performance. They get a 70% collapse at speed, full speed, in turbulent air. Same advice or different?
Well, M9, did you say?
M9. We're thinking ahead of the curve.
That won't collapse. That won't collapse.
Oh, right. Good.
No, it'll be exactly the same. It'll be exactly the same. In fact, it's more important with a high performance wing to go with the collapse.
Right. Okay.
As long as you're high enough, and as long as there's nobody there, or there's not a cliff face or something there. If you're near the ridge lower down, then I would always go for the immediate counter measures on both weight shift and brake.
If I mean, you've talked a lot about the importance of initial input. I just spat there, sorry. You've talked a lot about the importance of initial... Did you get that? Sorry about that.
I got that, yeah.
Initial input's really important on a two-liner if you get a big deflation, like a full frontal.
On any wing.
On any wing. So can you say more about that? Because that would deviate from your last kind of rationale and procedure when dealing with a big collapse.
No, because going with the glider would be considered as an initial input. The weight is all part of what is necessary. When I used to go on and on about initial input, it was normally more to do with frontals, but it can be any extreme situation, and it's very hard to be able to say exactly what is the correct initial input on any incident, because there's an infinite number of variables that can come with any collapse. No two collapses are the same that you take in anger, but it's always a way of mitigating the chances of ending up in a cascade, because if you end up in a cascade where you're a little bit lost with the wing and you're twisted and you lose control of the brakes, you have to throw your reserve. So everything you should do should always be towards not allowing the glider to get into that situation. The worst thing air can do to you is collapse the wing. It's very, 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 very rare. It's happened to me once in 25 years where the glider just stalls. You get gust stalled by a very strong bit of turbulence. But otherwise, the worst thing that air can do is either give you a side collapse of one proportion or a frontal collapse. And how you deal with that is the most important thing. And frontals, I always find having a symmetric input immediately you get a frontal is very useful because it kills the energy of the wing. Sometimes it may leave you in a slight parachutal situation, but that's fine. You can just put your hands up and fly away from that. But what it stops you from doing is ending up with the wingtips coming into each other and getting trapped in the lines and the subsequent cravat that creates.
Nice smack of the computer there.
Yeah. And so the initial input is a way of mitigating further problems down, 20 seconds down the road.
Yeah, and that initial is a deep, hard bang on the brakes to stop the wingtips coming in on a high aspect wing in a full frontal.
Yeah, it stops the wingtips coming in, and most importantly, reduces the size of that said frontal.
Yeah. Can you explain also why it's so important to ball up when you hit turbulent air, or it's not a euphemism, just if you hit turbulent air or you've had a big collapse, why is it important to
just so that you always go with the wing. If you're in your pod and you're a long thin thing, you tend to keep going in one direction as the wing goes in another direction, and that's what leads to twists. So you'll always when I get scared in the air, when it gets turbulent and I'm worried, I will tuck my legs in and I'll ball up and I'll be ready for those situations, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. And that stops the likelihood of twists, and it
reduces the chance of twists.
Right. Yeah. Right. Got it. Okay. All right. And when you're flying actively in strong air, how much of the time are you kind of looking at the wing on glide?
All of the time. I'll be looking at my wing mostly and glancing in my direction rather than vice versa. But I am a wing watcher. Yeah.
You're a wing watcher.
I'm a wing watcher. Yeah, a secret wing watcher.
Are you short-sighted or long-sighted? Because that might make a difference. Maybe you can't see that far ahead.
I'm short-sighted.
Okay. So the wing you can definitely see. Okay.
I can see something up there. Yeah. Yeah, and when it hits me in the face, I know I've got a problem.
Yeah, when you're wiping it off. Yeah. Do you have any other updates on flying two-liners safely? Because it seems like there's been a lot of progression in that in the last 8-9 years. Are there any other tips you can give for pilots kind of progressing onto two-liners in terms of flying them safely?
I think it's just getting used to flying on the risers, and I think that nothing has changed as far as I know in 8 years. But I think more pilots are becoming aware of what they need to do and the inputs that they need to use on their risers to keep the wing open. And I think there's still a bit of a stigma around two-liners, which probably comes from the early days, some of the first wings that we made, which they were quite difficult to fly. They were quite handful. They had a bit of energy, but pilots weren't quite ready for them. I think that was a real big thing now. I think if we brought the R10 back now and gave it to everyone, they'll be like, oh, it's a bit spicy on the inflation on launch, but otherwise they'd be fine. But I think now pilots have improved so much and they've got used to flying the gliders that it's not much of a problem. But the best thing to do for someone who's stepping that way is to get used to using your risers on your three-liner wing. And use them in the same way that you would use a brakes in turbulent air to keep the wing open. So it's active flying on the risers, not just the brakes. Mm-hmm. It only works really in sort of normal, mildish turbulence as you're gliding towards thermals. If you start getting into rough air, properly rough air, then it's best to go back down onto the brakes. But just get used to using the risers, and you can do that on the ground as well. You can ground handle with just the risers. Yeah. And just get used to the way the glider feels. And I think with a three-liner, you can... Well, it depends on the design as well. And it depends on manufacturing and the way the designer has made the wing, but most wings you can use active speed bar and rear risers to solidify the nose and keep the nose open.
Okay, sounds good. So we've got some questions coming up next. Is there anything else you want to share on terms of glider control, whilst we're in this area? We're in the glider control room at the moment.
Yes.
Go on.
No.
There isn't anything.
Particularly have anything. But I think the most important thing is to not put it to the side. And I think the most important thing, if you want a long, healthy flying career, is to actually embrace it. Even the pilots that have been flying for a long time already. See, the trouble is with paragliding is that it's very easy to go 20 years of flying and without ever feeling that you need to learn how to do a full stall, or feeling that you need to do an SIV course, because apart from the few sort of minor collapses, you've never been in that incident. But I think now, I think it's just so important to learn how to do this yourself, because you yourself need to understand how you're going to react in these situations. And it's much better to get experience of those feelings and those stresses and those tensions in a relatively controlled environment than when you're 100 meters above your local hill. So I think SIV training is and I think there's been a really good move. I mean, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We've had Jockey that's just been pushing this for his whole adult life, and everyone else is catching on now and doing it. And I think pilots also, there's a good vibe for SIV at the moment, and long may that continue.
It seems like younger pilots are kind of taking to it, and it's just a part of flying. But perhaps it's an age thing. I mean, I'm the wrong side of 40, and it's quite hard to push yourself to do an SIV when you remember how scary the last one was. What percentage?
I think the longer you fly without doing one, the harder it becomes, for sure. For sure, yeah. But now, no, I think the kids are doing it, the new pilots are doing it, and they're getting control of the full stall really nicely now, which is, I think there's a lot more shared knowledge about full stalling, and I think that's filtered out now, and people understand it, and people do it really, really well. So that for me is really positive. I think the standard of pilot, I can only really talk from looking at World Cup level pilots, but 10 years ago, the level of piloting, not just cross-country flying, because that's always been exceptionally good and exceptionally high, but the actual level of glider control was not that great. Whereas now, I think the level has increased very significantly at the top level. And I'm sure that will also have influence and effect on the local club members as well. Yeah,
good stuff. Okay. Right, should we move on to a bit of cross-country flying? I know it's your favourite subject.
I don't know much about cross-country, but yeah, go on.
You're either full stalling or you're racing, aren't you? There's not much in between with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that because you've done it for so long and it's kind of like, you pick your days and you like your racing, but you're not that fussed about...
No, I just don't do much cross-country here. I live in I think if I lived back in the UK, I'd do a lot more cross-country, but living here in the mountains, it doesn't really interest me anymore.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy. I love racing. I love competing. I love doing tasks with your friends, and everyone's got to do the same thing. And I like the cat and mouse and the ducking and the diving to try and win a race or do well. But the actual act of going cross country in the mountains on my own doesn't do it for me anymore. Not at all.
We'll come on to the cat and the mouse later, but I did love the fact you've been hammering away at discipline, and then the first competition task I flew with you 2 years ago, you were definitely the mouse. You were out front scuttling away. So it's good to know that even you can't learn your lessons.
Well, no, I do learn my lessons, but what I have to do, Hugh, is you're constantly tweaking. So if I've had a period where I feel like I'm being a little bit too cautious, then I need to rinse it out a bit and push on. And I'm not scared of doing that. And I tend to do it in the British Championships because I feel like I have to. and I always bomb out. I never do well anymore. But again, it's just a way of teaching yourself what you already know. Not making the same mistakes for the 50th time.
Yeah,
but, I do enjoy it.
Do they still hurt when you make mistakes?
No, not as much. No,
okay.
No. It used to. But now, no. I think I've done badly, and I've done so badly in so many competitions that I know it just doesn't matter anyway. So no, I'm not that bothered. Not that bothered anymore.
Didn't your daughter Flo say something to you last year when you I think you rang up or you came home and you said, "Oh, I came second," and she went, "Never mind, Daddy." Is that right?
No, it was when I went up to second in the world ranking.
Oh yeah.
And Catherine, my wife, said over breakfast, and Flo said, "Oh, never mind, Daddy.
You'll get there. You'll have your day." One thing that stuck with me is you gave some great advice in Brazil, I think, to Guy Anderson a few years ago, where you outglided lots of pilots on a shady day. You outglided them on an interwind section, and Guy said, "How did you do that?" And I think you replied that you just kept your ground speed on the GPS pegged at trim speed, 36, 37 k's an hour. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I do.
Can you explain? I mean, I can't understand. I'm very bad at maths. Can you explain the maths behind that? How does that apply to? No, okay. Why did you go for that then?
Because it makes the most sense. It makes most sense to me.
Why?
Because you know me, Hugh. I hate instruments. I hate the glide computers. I think in my instrument that I use now on a daily basis, I think I've still got the same glide from an R09 or something. I don't even know what polar I've got in my glide computer on my UDI, but it gives me a figure to say that I'm going to arrive at goal with 100 meters. Now I know that it doesn't know that. I know that it doesn't know what the air's in front of me, and so I never rely on my glide computer. The only information I like is what glide I require to get to goal and what glide I'm currently getting now. Otherwise, to glide, I try and match roughly trim speed glide, like you say, and I seem to glide reasonably well. Not always the best, not always the worst. It seems to be about right, and I glide roughly about the same speed as the people that have done all the square roots and tilly boots and are concentrating on their instruments. So it seems to work, and I know when I glide downwind, then he who glides the slowest glides the best. So I use those. So I'll use the Bs. If I get into zeros flying downwind, for example, I'll pull the glider back on the Bs and slow it down.
Okay.
If I want max glide.
Do you see that as a common mistake a lot of pilots make, is flying too fast and destroying their glides?
Occasionally, in the occasional task that we have, where you're on a long final glide, I've seen people go a bit too fast. Yeah. Okay.
Can you? This is a really difficult question, right? But can you explain a bit more about kind of choosing good lines for an intermediate pilot? It's got like 100 hours. They keep hearing about this thing about picking good lines, and for them, it's like, don't know. I'm gliding. I think I'm going to that cloud, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
What's the difference that makes the difference with gliding?
Well, I think that the most important thing to remember is always take the path of least resistance. So you may be thinking, right, I'm going in that direction, but if a little cumulus starts to pop off a few degrees to your left or to your right, then veer that way, and always try and follow the visual signs in the air where they're a lift. Another thing you can do is if you find you're in very heavy sink, is just to turn 45 degrees, and you can guess left or right. You don't know, guess left or right, but just try and get off that very heavy sinky line. That can sometimes help as well. But the trick is working out whether you're in that heavy sink because you're just about to hit a thermal, or you're in a horrible line. But in competitions, it's why I always say when you're leading a competition in a race, for example, and you're in front and you leave the thermal first, then you should really be focusing on everything behind you, all the guys behind you, because they will tell you whether you're on a good line or not. If you look behind and everyone's following you, it's normally a good sign. If if you look behind and everyone's flying off in a different direction, that means that you're on a horrible line and they've all shifted away from it.
Is that quite hard though? If you do look back and they've gone a slight angle away from you,
No,
you've kind of you've invested in your line. You're lower. You just take the hit and turn.
Take the hit and turn, yeah. I learned that off Kriegel. Ever heard of him? He's quite a good pilot. Watched him do that a few times. And
never heard of him.
It's a very effective way to not get yourself exposed too early in a race.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Interesting. So, should we move on to climbing now? Okay. So, I've been told by one of your fellow teammates that a few years ago they did a. You wouldn't have been part of this analysis project. You would have just handed your instrument in, I'm sure. But they worked out that you were, on average, climbing 1 meter a second quicker than anyone else in the team, consistently through the week. Yeah. So let's try and dig into that a bit. What have you?
It must have been a bad team that year.
You might have been flying a tandem solo. I don't know. But what have you spotted that seems to help pilots climb well? Looking at other pilots who climb well, what are they doing that helps them climb well, either in a gaggle or on their own?
There's several things, and I don't know the exact answer because I've got two heroes that I've always rated as good climbers. One is Wagger Watts, who just wangs it round and sticks it on the wingtip and peels the tip back and just throws it in straight in the middle of the core. And there's someone like yourself or Guy who just flies just in a very smooth fashion, keeping the wing really planted above the head and not doing big aggressive inputs. And both techniques seem to work very well. We'll probably find that the perfect way to do it is somewhere in between the two. Is where when the climbs are relatively weak, then you have to be very smooth and comfortable with the wing. But when the thermal starts to feist you up a bit, you need to get feisty with it and attack the thermal a little bit more. So I guess it's having a balance between the two, which means you climb well.
And it's
picking the climbs. I'm sure that was from a time when I'm sure that was probably in a period where people were. Like if you're flying in Sant André, for example, in the summer, there's no point in taking that 2 meter climb when you're above the ridge because you need to get further on down the field and take the 7 meter climb that's further down. So that's probably, it's not me climbing better, it's just climbing in the stronger climbs and leaving the weak ones probably.
So you've described really well how you have to change your style of flying dependent on the conditions in terms of your sort of turning circle, and you also now talk about observation. How do pilots develop those skills in observation?
Just by looking. We always go on about observation. It's the most important thing in flying. It's the most common thing you see in beginner, intermediate pilots, even experienced pilots, especially in competitions. Competitions throws it out really obviously, but the good pilots have just got their eyes peeled. As soon as someone's climbing better than they are, they're there. They're not faffing around. But I see it a lot on my local sites here, and I used to see it a lot in the UK where you're in a really good climb and there's someone climbing 100 meters, 200 meters away from you. You're climbing much higher than them, and they don't come to you. They just allow you to go past. So I think you should never be satisfied with the climb that you're in, and you should keep your eyes peeled. If you're climbing with someone, then your focus should be on them and the visual reference all the time. It's not difficult. It's not complicated.
But what you're saying is shift your focus to differentials as opposed to absolutes. So that pilot flying at 2 meters might be going, "This is the best climb of the day for me." They're not observing the difference.
Yeah.
Whereas you're saying observe the difference. That's more important than anything else.
Yeah,
Okay. And do you think that comes from experience, that the ability to handle your wing plus be observant? Is that linked?
No, because I think experience helps obviously, because you learn it when you compete. But no, there's some very young pilots that come through that get it immediately. I remember flying with Tia Goldsmith, Bruce's son, and I was flying with him. He couldn't have been more than 16, 17, and we were going around together on a thermal, and his eyes were right on me. He was always watching me, and that's exactly how you should fly. And it's rare that you see that with inexperienced or younger pilots, but it's not impossible. No, it's not difficult.
Okay. Okay. And just a couple of technical points. Where do you fly in your weight range generally?
I'm not heavy. I don't like to fly too heavy. I like to be about 3/4 of the way up the weight range. Yeah.
Okay.
I think after this confinement, I might be closer to the top, but 3/4 normally.
We can only see chest up, Russ. You're all good. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah.
What about using your body to? I mean, I know you've talked about being short-sighted, but are you feeling the air through the harness or mainly through the risers?
No, it's mainly through the brakes and the risers, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. I call myself wrong way Russ because I always turn the wrong way in a thermal. I'm not very good at. I always think, it's to my right, and then I do a turn and sink, and no, it's over there. It's the other side. So, I use a combination of everything but mostly through the brakes and the risers. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great stuff. Okay. Here we go. Attitude. I've called this section attitude because I know you're not a big psychology fan. I remember showing you my game of the inner game of tennis about 15 years ago, and you completely slammed me. But now you've gone all hippie, and you've got some 5 karate rings of truth or something with paragliding. Is that right? Can you explain what the 5 rings are?
That's an old theory. That one. The rings. It's a samurai thing. It's about being in control of earth, wind, fire, and water. I think the 4 rings, the 4 essential rings. But to be a complete samurai, you need to use the 5th ring, and the 5th ring is about forgetting all the others and just being in the flow. And I think I related that to paragliding because to me it brought in all the elements perfectly. It's about being able to know everything there is about the weather, learn about how to fly your wing, learn about competition tactics. And I could never think of a good one for the 4th one. But the most important thing is when you fly is not to get too bogged down into it. It's just go with the flow. I've seen lots of very good pilots that look at the weather, for example, and rather than just keeping their eyes open, looking for wings, looking for birds, looking for trees moving, they're trying to work out whether the sea breeze has come in and what the valley wind's doing, and they're trying to model it in such a complex way that they lose focus on the more obvious, simple things. So I like to keep it simple, Hugh, and so just going with the flow, trusting your instinct, and keeping your eyes open for observation are the key elements.
And when you talk about sort of going with the flow, that's about not being swamped with too much emotion or information. It's about having an open mind and being able to process what's around you without getting kind of overly focused on one aspect, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's very easy to get over-focused on instruments. It's very easy to get over-focused in analysis of the weather. Obviously, analysis of the weather is super important for cross-country flying. I mean, it's what we do. It's what we have to do. But if you start concentrating too much, then you lose the core bandwidth which is observation.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's what you all have to go back towards. What do I need to do right now? And normally the answer is open your eyes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I've got some questions here from some of your peers and friends. Nick Grease, out of Truckee, California.
Hey Nick.
He's asking, can you talk a little bit about controlling the gaggle? This is a bit high end, but in a race, just to explain this to others, a bit like a cycling race will have a peloton. You have a big group generally called the lead gaggle, and the trick is to stay in that gaggle, and because it's the most efficient way to travel. So you've got a bit of a reputation for being able to control the gaggle. Can you talk a bit about what helps with that, and also what you do when you're in the lead?
Well, like I said earlier, I look behind me. I see what everyone else is doing, because it's very tempting once you're, on the top of the climb and top of the lead gaggle, and you get to the top, you get to cloud base, and everyone is coming. It's very tempting to go, and you should go, but it's very then tempting to focus a little bit too much on what's ahead of you, and start making your cross country decisions, which you have to do, but you mustn't lose focus on the gaggle, because as soon as you don't, you can expose yourself. You can go on long glides, you can get low, you can get a weaker thermal. Meanwhile, the gaggle have gone a slightly different way, got a stronger climb, and you're out of the game. You're exposed. You've lost position. So when you're on the top of the climb, it's best to go, not glide too fast, so that the others are going to come. They'll naturally want to catch you up, so they'll be gliding faster and hopefully slightly worse. If you're on a good line. If you're not on a good line, then you'll be looking behind, and that way you can shift over quite quickly and rejoin, and you might not be the top dominant one, but you'll still be in the middle of the pack, and then you can get yourself back to the top by picking your climbs well.
You talked about.
I think the most important thing is to climb well. That's the key in competitions, and when you see the really great pilots, they all climb well. They all climb very, very well. And there's a handful of pilots that stand out in that department.
You talked about being exposed, which is like a strategic thing where you're out ahead and you kind of expose yourself to risk. So can you talk about the opposite of that? Is it being protected within the gaggle, or what are you doing to be the opposite of exposed?
The opposite of exposed is just sitting in the gaggle and never making a decision. It's quite an effective way to fly if you want to fly just for a result, but it makes most people feel a bit dirty at the end of the competition, because you don't want to just pimp. But pimping is something that you can't just come and pimp in a World Cup these days, because you have to have the skills and the ability to be able to roll with the leaders anyway. So pimping isn't done a huge amount.
Okay.
But it depends what you want to do. It depends what you want, how you want to fly, and what you want to fly like.
Okay, I've got quite a technical one here. I think that this pilot I'm about to his question, I think his style might be slightly different from yours, but you can correct me. Harry Bloxham, he's asking, how much of your decision making is a conscious risk versus reward equation decision, and how much of it is just doing what feels right without quite knowing what the decision is?
It used to be more the latter, whereas now everything is risk reward now. It's what do I achieve by doing this? I've got 50k to go to goal. Why am I charging off from this thermal 3/4 of the way up at full speed? It's pointless. Okay, so everything is risk reward. The closer you get towards goal, then the more risk you're willing to take to try and win the race. But it depends where you are in a competition as well. So, but no, it's all risk reward now. It's all risk reward.
Would you say that the same philosophy should apply to 100, 200 hour pilots learning to fly XC? Should they be in a sort of analytical frame of mind with risk and reward?
No, I think cross country flying and competition flying are two separate things. Although we kind of do the same thing, they are you fly in different ways. If I fly cross country, it will normally always be just gut instinct. I've learned now that my gut instinct is not always right, but it's more right than my analytical brain of trying to work stuff out. Mm-hmm. So I'll always fly on gut instinct. I'll always take the path of least resistance, just looking at the sky or looking at the ground. If I've got no clouds, flying on blue days sometimes makes it easier because it takes one of the sources of information out of the equation, and you can just follow the ground features. where you think you're likely to get the best thermals. And anyone listening to this, their idea is as good as mine, because I think that's the important thing. I think people overcomplicate flying, and it's not that difficult. And I think most pilots have been flying for a few years, know everything that a very experienced pilot does. But I think experienced pilots kind of just apply what they know a little bit better because they've had more experience doing it. But no, I go gut instinct for cross-country flying and more risk-reward for competition flying.
So I don't want to bore you here, but there's a psychologist called Eugene Gendlin. He did lots of research on what he termed the felt experience, which is your body's reaction to a decision. So if something feels right, that's kind of your body's way of telling you that it based on previous experiences, you haven't calculated it like a computer in your head, but based on everything that's happened, given this situation, that's probably the right one. A bit like any gut feeling response. So there's still some rationale behind it. So you're saying kind of trust that when you're making your
trust your gut instinct. And I know as well. Sometimes especially when you're you just glide and you don't know what you're gliding at, and it's like, why am I gliding? And I get this strange feeling at the back of my head that I know that I'm making a mistake. And it's good now, because when I get that feeling, it always triggers me to start thinking and start assessing exactly what I'm doing. Whereas other times, you've just got to accept, well, I've run out of ideas, I'm just going to glide that way. And as you know, Hugh, that happens quite a lot in flying. And most of the time, just by gliding in the direction that you want to go, you'll bumble into a thermal if you've got no other better ideas. There's a difference between, okay, I've got no good ideas, I'm just going to glide that way, and leaving a thermal, going on a glide, thinking, no, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where are you going? There's two slight differences in that, and I've learned to clock that now. And last time when I was in the British Championships, I had that, I'm leaving, and then I'm like, what are you doing? You're making a mistake. And I knew I was making a mistake. I didn't expect to glide from very high all the way down to the ground. I expected to hit something, but I deserved it because I did know it as I left.
I think you need a bit of a tea break, Russ. Have you got a cup of tea with you?
I've got a glass of water.
Oh, very nice. Tea, really, tea.
I haven't got the right mug.
It's true. You can take an Englishman out of England, but you can't take England out of Englishman. I'm amazed you're surviving in France without tea.
Yeah. We've still got some of the tea that you bought last time, I think.
Really? Oh. Yeah. It's made up last. Should we move on to design? Some design questions.
Yeah.
Is that okay? How does it work in the team? Because there's 4 or 5 of you focusing on design and development. Do you all muddle in, or who does what?
Well, it's changed over the years, and I think we've found quite a nice medium now. We've got most of the design is done by David Dagol. He's our boss. He runs the R&D department. And a department, it sounds like a big company. There's only like 6 of us. He runs R&D, and he designs wings like the Buzzes, the Mojos, the Rushes, and our paramotor range. Then we've got Luke and Fred, who do the design of... Fred does a bit of design everywhere. Fred's our resident mathematician, geek. And so he's very versatile and useful. And Luke concentrates on the design of our ENCs, ENDs, and competition wings. And then Honor and myself, we don't really do design per se. We don't sit there with the CAD software and build stuff, but we concentrate more on the flying. And we're out flying all the time on the different prototypes. What we found as well is that it's very easy for a designer who has an idea to then implement their idea and then try and convince themselves that their idea is good and it's working. Whereas as a third party, the test team, we can just say, no, that's rubbish. And we can be very frank and unbiased towards these sort of things. So it seems to be working quite well this way. We get a lot of time on the wings. Honor and myself are flying it all the time that we can, pretty much. And the designers have time as well to design. So we've got quite a nice balance at the moment.
I sort of seen a comment pop up. Neil Roberts says Russ sweeps the floor. I think what he means is that you sweep the floor when you're flying competition wings. Nothing to do with your role at Ozone. Okay. Can you name? Here's a good one. Can you name? I say it's a good one. It's mine. Can you name? It's going to push you, this one. Well, I hope it may not push you. Can you name one wing by another brand that's really impressed you in the last 10 years?
I could name a few, I think. Unfortunately, I don't get to fly that many wings from other brands. And I haven't flown that many impressive wings from other brands. You put me on the spot here, Hugh, now. I remember looking at... I've been impressed with some of the behaviour of some wings. And I've seen that from teaching SIV. And I remember we were having a period where we were struggling with frontals a little bit, and the way the glider was recovering from frontals. And we had Alex came out with his UPXE Trango XC, was it? I can't remember now. Which was very good in frontals, even for its aspect ratio. And he was doing full speed frontals on SIV with me. And I was saying, no, this is looking really good. Okay, just pop the brakes on the poppers. Don't touch anything. Full speed, go on. And he was doing really big, nice frontals, and the behaviour was very good. What else have I flown recently? I've flown a gradient tandem, which I really liked. That was very good when we were doing the Magnum update. But otherwise, we don't generally get the opportunity to fly other people's wings as much as we'd like to. It's just whether someone is there on the hill and they're willing to, if they're stupid enough to let me or Onno have a go on one.
I mean, there are so many amazing wings out there. Do you feel like you miss out by not having that opportunity to fly lots of other brands?
Oh, absolutely. It can only help us with our development if we fly other wings. But where we fly in Gordon, there's not many other brands around. There's not many people flying other brands around. There's mostly Super, BGD and Ozones on the hill. Mm-hmm. But the last time I flew one of Bruce's wings, I really enjoyed it, which was the Cure. I like that wing. Very nice behaviour inside collapse. Nice feel. But yeah, there's lots of wings I'd like to fly, but I don't get the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. What about in terms of designers? Can you name a designer from another brand that you really respect, that either a fairly new one or one that you've just watched over the years? I mean, there are lots of designers who've been in the game a long time, and a few that have come up recently.
I respect everyone, Hugh. I mean, I think everyone who's working in this industry is working in a genuine way, and they want to make the best wings that they can. And they have their design philosophies and they stick with it, and I think that's fine. And I respect everyone in the industry. I haven't everyone I've met in our industry has been really, really good and really, really cool. So, but I tell you who I do, Felipe in Australia, because he's working hard. I mean, to start a company, to do the design, to do the marketing, to do the whole business side and the design and the development side, and that's a lot on his plate. So big hats off to Felipe.
Yeah, his new wings with the flow, we're reviewing that at the moment. It's really nice. So yeah, it's impressive. Can we move on to a particular design aspect of Ozone wings? It's particularly the sniffiness of the wing, how well a wing kind of tells you what's going on. And I found with the Delta 2 and the M6 and the Enzo 3, they've got a really nice kind of tendency to tell you what's going on. The Xeno, the Delta, the Xeno and the Delta 3 less so. They feel more sort of solid and less sniffy. But I'm interested in kind of, is that part of the brief, or is sniffiness just something that comes by chance? Or
I think it's probably. The trouble with design is that it's very easy to try and pick out one element, but it's never that. It's always a combination of the elements that create a whole. And one of the difficulties is always for example, when we made the Xeno, for example, we wanted to make it really comfortable. And one person's comfortable is another person's boring. And another person's sniffy is another person's uncomfortable. So getting the internal tension of the straps is really important. And also the twist of the wing as well, for the way the glider gives the feedback. But it's not something that we always try and design a glider with a type of pilot in mind. And we try to empathize with that type of pilot as to how comfortable it will be. And the way we do that is by using our previous model. You know, for example, when we made the Delta 2 and we made the Delta 3, I'll give you that for the Xeno, but for the Delta 2 to the Delta 3, our feeling was that actually the wing is feedbacking a little bit more and is giving it a little bit more information in a good way. But that's why it's really important as well to fly the gliders on a daily basis, because the texture of the air changes every day, and you know the gliders feel different on a daily basis. So to actually give a fair, proper test flight for any wing, you need to fly it on 2 days, and you need to fly it with your current wing on both days. So you fly for 20 minutes, you land, you then take off into exactly the same air again, and you do that on 2 days. And I think that's the only fair way to make a really good comparison between wings.
Yeah, I'd agree.
If you can't do it on 2 days, then you've got to at least do it on the same day. But it's important when you're test flying to. I mean, this is how we work. It's exactly how we work. You know, we use our current model as the basis. That's the ground zero, and everything goes from that and gets compared back to that. And so as part of our daily flying session, we always use the original model next to the prototypes for a good comparison.
Just have a little glass of water, Ross. I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do this little bit of advertising, so bear with me a sec. So I just wanted to show people, anyone watching, that's Cross Country magazine, and at the moment we're giving that many away. I think that's 15 there for the price of 10. If you subscribe at the moment, if you're having a bit of a layoff or not getting out, as several of us aren't. I'm just going to drop it on the floor. You I might knock the table off. It's quite. Did you hear that? It's quite a weight of magazines, isn't it?
It's a very big weight, yeah.
So yeah, 15 issues for the price of 10. We're all pilots running the magazine, and we've all been passionate about paragliding since we started. We're a small company. We pay way more tax than Facebook in the UK. We do, yeah. So thank you for hosting us, Facebook, but we're more ethical than you, frankly. Should we move on to the next bit?
I think you should.
Okay. I asked Kriegel this question. I'm going to ask you as well.
Oh no, what did he say? That's unfair. Can't follow in his footsteps.
So let's say you're flying, this is back to glider control, improving your glider control, yeah? If you're flying, you've got 100 hours and you're flying on a lovely calm evening, you've got 500 meters of ground clearance, what's one maneuver or something you could do to help you build your glider control skills?
How experienced are you?
100 hours.
Flying speed bar and using the risers. And just getting used to that. I think that's the best thing to do. I think if you haven't done an SIV, then you shouldn't do SIV type maneuvers above the ground. But on the other hand, you can. The only way to learn is to expose yourself to danger. I learned how to do it. Well, first of all, I learned with jockey, and I learned above the water in a safe way, and before I was any particularly good, but I'd done a lot of it, I then started doing it over the ground, teaching myself, which and I didn't have that many near misses, but I did have a few, and with hindsight I wouldn't do it that same way again, and I wouldn't recommend other people to do it. But if you've done lots of SIV and you're comfortable doing it, then doing some simple side collapses, frontal collapses, that sort of thing, is doable over the ground. Yeah.
What about?
I'd wait till you're more experienced before you start doing anything more complex like stalling or something like that.
What about a pilot with, say, 300 or 400 hours? He's done a couple of SIV courses. What about doing? And they'll know what this is, but fast 360s and exits to get used to pitch control.
Yeah, that's fine. If you've got the height, I think that's all fine. That's all fine. But I think any experienced SIV, the trouble is when you teach SIV for a long time, is that you see so many incidents that you can't believe that the pilot managed to do that. So I think to give one piece of advice for everyone is unfair, and it's not suitable. I think if you're a naturally talented sportsman and athlete, and you've got very good coordination, then you can probably go and do an entire SIV set above your local hill, and you'll probably be okay. But if you're not in that bracket, then you probably won't be okay, and the consequences of getting it wrong are just not worth the risk of doing it. So it's hard to give one answer that's fit for everyone, and I think that's why it's important as for all of us as pilots is to know our own level, to know our own type of who we are, and once you know who you are, you'll be able to make better decisions as to what's suitable for you.
What about a pilot who's just kind of ridge soaring in nice, smooth laminar air and has got 50 meters to play with, and they've got an hour of this in the evening? And a lot of pilots just go back and forth, and might as well be sat at home watching TV in terms of their skill development. What could they be doing to improve their glider control skills?
50 foot above the hill, nothing really, not safely. I think you should be concentrating on landing safely, enjoying the moment for what it is, landing safely, and going home at the end of the day. There are times when you can push and learn, and other times that you can't. But yeah, in the winter you can move away from the hill, come back, try and get up from low, and do that sort of thing. But no, just enjoy it. That's why we're here. That's what we do it for. We do it for enjoyment. And if you're not enjoying it, there's no point in doing it, is there? It's too dangerous.
I know we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I think I remember you talking about wanting possibly to be a paramedic, like when you're thinking about different jobs you could do. Is this something like, obviously, test flying collapsible wings is quite an inherently risky thing to do. Is there something about the risk or the adrenaline that attracts you to flying, or not keeps you in it, or? No. I mean, I've actually enjoyed flying over the years more and more as the fear goes away, and the fear has gone away. I'm still fearful of paragliding. I'm still treated with a lot of respect, because the biggest danger for us, and this is something I go on and on with Ono about on a daily basis, is that it's so easy when you fly every day, all day, and you're doing the job that we do, to become complacent with it and to just to not worry about it. So it's really, really important that we always take a step back and we look at what we're doing, and we just be really careful. And I've made a few mistakes over the last couple of years, and I've got away with it. Haven't injured myself or badly, but I've made mistakes, and it just shows that we're all fallible, and that we just have to be careful. But I've enjoyed my flying as I've become better, because I have less fear, because I know what I can do, and I think I know the limit now a little bit better. So I enjoy it more. Cool. Right, well, I think we better wrap up there. We've had an hour. Just to answer a couple of questions. Yes, Cross Country Magazine is available in digital format. I know that's the most pressing question everyone has had, despite Russ being here. It's been dying to know. So you can subscribe online. Russ, one last question for you. What is the glide ratio of a competition CCC wing at full speed in still air?
Good question. I reckon it's a lot less than most people imagine. We measured I believe it was an Enzo 2 at full chat, and this is not a exact measurement because we can't do that. We cannot measure the polar curves of our wings. We've to the point where we've given up, we stopped doing it. We don't even try to do that. But Fred one day extrapolated information from a series of glides that we made in as close to what we can say was still air, not sinking, not lifting, and no wind. It wasn't. There was movement in the air. So there's going to be noise in this. But Fred extrapolated that we were gliding at full speed around about 6-1, which is a lot less than most people imagine. But take that with a pinch of salt. I don't know if it's true. We don't know if it's true. It's just what we've measured over a series. And that glider was going as well as any other comp wing at the time as well. So okay. We're not gliding that great at full speed. That's why he who glides the slowest glides the best.
What a note to end on. Thank you, Russ.
My pleasure. Have a great evening.
Thank you. And so we've got Jin Sok Song next week, I think. Any questions I should be asking him?
Well, I'd just like to say he's very lucky that he's in Korea and being able to work, because we've been shut down here. Ozone is basically, we haven't been able to develop wings for the last month and a half. But speaking with Idris, I hear that they've been flying quite regularly in Korea.
Apparently they'll be doing night shifts.
Yeah, so we have a big pile of wings rating in the office, ready for when it's flyable again, and looking forward to when hopefully we'll be able to get out there again and crack on.
Excellent. Well, hopefully it won't be too long.
Cheers, you.
Cheers, Russ. Take care. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.